Hello, everyone. Good evening. Commissioner Gross here, proudly serving as the 42nd Boston Police Commissioner. I am so happy that I have this opportunity to address the Bostonians and the Commonwealth of Mass, and even people across this country. Let me tell you about a visit I had today. U.S. Attorney General Barr asked to come and see me to talk about what's happening in policing in Boston and my opinions about what's happening in our great nation. First of all, I'm a student of history. I know the controversy betwixt Democrats and Republicans, but I know this too. People are dying out there, civilians, police. And as a black man who's a student of history, from William E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, you never, ever run and hide from a conversation because you're supposed to have hard conversations when it is affecting the lives of the people of your community. With that being said, when Attorney General Barr arrived and he sat in my office, I said, "Sir, you're going to get my perspective as an African-American male and for a commissioner of Boston." So I have a list here of exactly what I talked about. Again, I don't run, duck, and hide from any conversation from anyone. And I thought it would be important for him to hear, again, from my perspective and the people from the community of Boston, which I bragged about. So the first topic of discussion was police reform. I said, you see what's happening across the nation. Everybody is at each other's throats, especially in race relations. And then I talked about a definition. Black Lives Matter, how people think it's a radical group. And I talked about me being a historian and how African Americans weren't brought here on their own. We were forced here. And through systems of government from centuries ago to decades, and I'll just give you a perspective from the 50s and 60s, because this is exactly how I explained it. If black and brown people and people of color are dying at the hands of the executive branch of the United States and the judicial system in that Jim Crow era of laws and segregation and prejudice, and if nothing's changed from then till now, people are going to shout, "Our lives matter, Black Lives Matter." It doesn't mean they're militant, it's that the voice needs to be heard. Then I discussed further about the importance of police reform now in the 21st century. Every year, we take 2 steps forward, we got knocked 8 steps back because we still keep having officer-involved shootings of black and brown men, right? Whether some deem it justified or not, it's negative in the eyes of the people of the United States. Police reform means this. You have to review your rules, your regulations, and your policies because we work for the people. And right now, the people do not trust us. A lot don't. Even one's too many, but I mean, it's a lot. There is a racial divide like I haven't seen since the 60s and 70s. So when I talked to the Attorney General about this racial divide in police reform, we're like, we serve the public. We have every right to expect that they want to review our rules, our regulations, and our policies. That's called accountability. Because right now, trust is out the window. And here's why. I said in Minneapolis, I condemn the actions of the Minneapolis 4. They have set law enforcement back for years. And think about this. For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, the people that we served watched 4 police officers slowly and slowly and slowly turn into murderers. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So I'm like, police reform is necessary, and we need to have the cold, hard conversations. I also stated that Here's how the conversation should begin. If you want to honor the life of Mr. Floyd, split the 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I'll take 4 minutes and 23 seconds, and I'll tell you how I feel as a black man, a brown man, Asian, a person of color. And I'll tell you why I feel the way I feel, and how I feel about law enforcement, and how I should be treated. Everybody helped build this country. I says, and then you take your 4 minutes and 23 seconds and explain how you feel. And then somewhere in those conversations, we're going to expound upon that, and we're going to have a broader discussion that will hopefully help heal our nation. So yeah, U.S. Attorney General Barr came here. I told him that. Perspective as a black man. About racism, about how people really don't trust law enforcement. Then I went right into the discussion. 8 can't wait. Just going across the nation. And then, for all of you who don't know, and you've seen me before the cameras before, I said, Attorney General, we already had that in place. As a matter of fact, in 2015, when there was a study in 21st century policing because of the shootings of unarmed black and brown men, the study was led by Charles Ramsey, and at the conclusion, everyone convened in D.C., and we talked about what community policing should look like and how it should bolster the foundation of your department. And I said everyone was shocked when President Obama, I don't play politics, I tell it like it is, when President Obama stated that Boston, if you want to learn these things, go to Boston. So the 8 can't wait. Since we have these in place, we need to tweak some of the language because people need to see it. They don't need to read 3 or 4 pages down on this policy and this rule. We need to have things out front so people can see. And then I mentioned the name of one of my mentors that is the head of a 9-person panel, former U.S. Attorney Wayne Budd. He's going to lead 9 people into reviewing our policies, our procedures, our rules and regs, whether we should have a civilian review board, whether we should have ombudsmen with subpoena power. Told them all that, and that we welcome this, and that these folks that are selected definitely represent the community, right? We have defense attorneys, we have the president of the NAACP, we have community activists. It's well-rounded. And we welcome the review, because if the people of Boston don't have a review, they're going to think that we're just like everyone else, from Ferguson to Minneapolis to South Carolina to Long Island. Then I went right into law enforcement certification and the discussions we were having about no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. And the public should have the right to expect that officers serve them well, without graft and corruption, and that you can't move from one department to one department and one department hiding behind sealed documents. And I talked about the governor and the lieutenant governor, undersecretary, secretary, Mayor Walsh, and how we have to have these things in place now, or you will not have trust. You will not have legitimacy. So the governor signed in the law enforcement certifications, training, things to follow that the people that we serve can also read and hold us accountable by. And also, I've had a long and storied career. There's nothing like a cop you don't trust right next to you. So that's good for everyone. So law enforcement certification and how that came about. Then I went right back into the murder of Mr. Floyd and how that impacted people of color and people who are Caucasian, but something that I haven't seen in a long time. We have everybody protesting against that murder. Not a death, a murder. And that here in Boston, whoever said something about me that knows me and knows of my ilk and that I stand for the people, they can tweet whatever they want. But know this, I bragged about Boston today. I bragged about the mayor, the city councilors, believe it or not, the governor. I bragged about the youth of Boston. I bragged about the people of Boston. This country began here. And I said, they said enough is enough. That Mr. Floyd's murder, we just can't have that again. So people protested. And they wanted to have their voices heard. They were angry. And unfortunately, police got hurt in Massachusetts, so did civilians, because of an anarchist group with their own agenda tried to destroy our city, but the people of Boston stood up to that. I also talked about the murder of Mr. Floyd and how we denounced it. Who is we? Who are we? The Massachusetts Major City Chiefs, Massachusetts Chiefs, Noble, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. You folks have heard me say this before, but now I'm telling this to the Attorney General of the United States, a perspective of a black man and a police commissioner. I told how in Massachusetts we're working together. We realize it. In 351 cities and towns, the major cities of Boston, Springfield, and Worcester, we're sending that message. We're willing to listen, and we have to change. People don't trust us. Okay? He's listening. And I said, you have to be able to take some criticism and constructive criticism. And for God's sakes, do not leave out the voice of the young people. They feel as though they're talked about, talked over, and not included. Here's what we're doing in Boston, and we have had those discussions. Then I moved on to health, safety, and wellness of officers and the community. As I alluded to before, who's getting hurt out there? Civilians and officers who live in the community. There's trauma on both sides. Recognize trauma. We know the reason, whether it's the murder of Mr. Floyd, lack of trust, the issues are there. And you think I'm not going to tell the Attorney General about that in the United States, how we feel in Boston, how I feel as a black man? I'm going to run and hide? I can't talk to him. He's Republican. I can't talk to him. This is what we're talking about. We need to have these conversations. So officer, health, safety, and wellness, and the community. We need to address our trauma. We need to talk about why we're pissed off, why we're angry, how we feel, like being grouped in as any other racist officer, and how we as a community, especially people of color, shouldn't be deemed as like a horror to any city. That's wrong. So we talked about heal the mind, move on. I'm going to speed it up. The next subject, I said training, training, training. We're proud, as I alluded to before, in 2015, President Obama said, if you want to learn community policing, go to Boston. And then I had a recommendation for the Attorney General. Trainings of police departments from small to large. You should have a bias-free policing policy. Your academy curriculum and training should have 3 pillars, 3 foundations. Fair and impartial policing to address your implicit and unconscious biases. Procedural justice. Treat people like you want to be treated. And you'll learn empathy, sympathy, care, and respect. And de-escalation. De-escalation, which we've taught for almost the last 9 years. Teach all that, and then bring in people from the community to share their lived experiences so that you don't get a negative stereotypical view or perception from movies. I can't tell you how many movies and books and everything social have been demeaning to people of color. It says you have to address that. Bring in people so the officers will learn that this is for real and that you're not going to be scared of people because of a book, movie, or so on. So address that. And then, here's a shocker. I discuss politics and politicians. I says a lot are angry. a lot are working for their constituency, but as law enforcement, you have to include the politicians, whether you think they're damning to you or not. You have to have that conversation, but you have to make sure that the politicians know that law enforcement is a part of their constituency too, and should be in the conversation and not just ostracized because of their profession. Politicians have power too, to represent the community. And the last time I checked, you shouldn't be afraid to talk to anyone, from the president, the attorney general, a racist, a white supremacist. Have that conversation. Show them who you are and what you're about. So, that's what I talked about. And I talked about I'm proud of Boston. I talked about how I'm from a pig farm in Maryland and I made it this far from the people in the community. And I'll be damned if I'm going to hide from a conversation from anyone, especially in D.C., when we're telling him all that I've discussed in hopes that you truly get a meaning and an education about what we're doing so that we can make improvements in this country before there's a damn race war. We need to have these discussions. And lastly, I'll say this. A lot of people know me. I'll talk to anyone. I've gone behind the walls, MCI Concord, to talk to brothers and sisters about restorative justice. I talk to people about race. So anyone that knows me, that puts out something negative without even calling me so I can quantify or contextualize it, shame on you. I'm not about politics or political aspirations. I spoke for the people of Boston today, from a top official in D.C. that I think needed to hear the message from a black man and from a proud police commissioner, number 42, like Jackie Robinson. So that's what I did today, folks. If I have to educate the U.S. Attorney again, more than willing to discuss these same things. We are Boston, and we are strong. We don't duck, and we don't hide from conversations, because quite frankly, again, not to be repetitive, too many people are dying. How far is this going to go? So if I had the opportunity to tell how I felt to the Attorney General, that's what I did. And the mayor had nothing to do with it. Don't beat up the mayor, because he knows how I am. I wanted to have this discussion as a black man. I wanted to have this discussion as a commissioner that made it this far by the community that raised me. So that's what I did today. Shame on anyone that has me cornered by guilt by association because I had a discussion.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.